Welcome to VidZet. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. As we study Obamacare, we find ourselves in the position of Frodo and Sam as they approach the shadows of Mordor. What kind of a tale have we fallen into? You see, Obamacare is just one chapter in a very long tale that begins roughly at the beginning of the 20th century. Men such as J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller had accumulated immense fortunes. This immense wealth created a backlash known as the Progressive Movement. It was built in the language of Karl Marx and had its first major legislative victory in the Social Security Act of 1935. Medical insurance was excluded on the grounds that it was socialized medicine. In 1941, only 10% of the population had any form of health insurance. In 1943, when World War II was in full swing, wage and price controls prevented companies from giving their employees a raise. So at that time, the War Labor Board ruled that fringe benefits were not subject to the wage controls. So health insurance suddenly became a popular way to give workers a raise. The next major part of the story comes in 1965 with passage of the Medicare Act under Lyndon Johnson. It became effective in 1967 and forced all seniors into a collective form of health insurance. It also created a problem with the law of subsidy. When you subsidize something, you're going to get, one, more of it, and two, it's going to get more expensive. Let me repeat that. The law of subsidy says you're going to get more of it, and it's going to get more expensive, and it applies everywhere you subsidize anything. Health insurance is no exception, and we saw, beginning in 1967, a steady rise in the cost of health care. Between World War II and 1967, health care took up about 5% of gross domestic product. That's $1.20. By 2010, when Obamacare was passed, it had steadily risen to where it was almost 17% of gross domestic product. The cost of health care had more than tripled. The result of insurance. Now, how does insurance cause this subsidy effect? It's really quite simple. Before health insurance, people would get care, but they paid whatever the market would bear. And doctors would provide charity care, understanding it was charity. They might get a chicken, or they might get some small amount of work around their house as payment from people who simply didn't have money. But health care was provided. This was a market function. But with health insurance, all of a sudden, everybody with insurance was able to pay. And the insurance became a subsidy, a guarantee of payment. And as a result, charges went up for hospitals. They went up for doctors. In fact, when we look at Blue Cross and Blue Shield, they were formed as organizations designed to create a guarantee of income for doctors and hospitals. So with Medicare, we found a subsidy for the insurance programs, which was a subsidy for doctors and hospitals, and price went up. There's another law in play here, the law of rationing. Put simply, everything in life is rationed. I might want to get an Italian supercar to drive, but I can't spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars that are required to buy that car. Instead, I drive a Honda. Now, that simply says that cars are rationed by price. And before health insurance, medical care was rationed by price and charity. But when you put in insurance and the law of subsidy kicks in, price is now going up. And because price is going up, medical care starts to get to be too expensive. And the second form of rationing starts to come in. It's called denial of care. You can't have it. It's much like the ration coupons that were used in World War II. If you wanted to buy meat, you had to have a certain amount of ration coupons. Otherwise, you're hosed. You simply can't do it.
There you are.
Thank you.
27 points, please.
Oh, but you see, we had to rush right over here to get here before 6, and...
Well, we didn't have time to go home for our ration books.
Besides, we don't have enough points left this week for that steak.
We'll give you the difference next week.
Well, that's 27 points, please.
An early reaction to this price spiral was the 1982 action, where all doctors' fees were frozen by Medicare. Then in 1983, the American Medical Association, which by the way only represents about 10% of doctors, colluded with the feds to create what were known as the current procedural terminology codes by which all billing would be done. They also created the diagnosis-related groupings, or DRGs, which set payments for hospitals. This was price fixing. These things really didn't make a large amount of difference. Prices continued to go up. Then in 1986, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act was passed, which said that any patient who came to an emergency room had to be treated without regard for their ability to pay. And that meant that if someone, for example, had a heart attack and they were coming in and crushing chest pain, a cardiologist would be required to take them to the cath lab to do their heart cath, and now he would have to do their angioplasty to break up the heart attack. And only after the patient was stable in the cardiac cath recovery area could anyone ask about insurance. So many thousands of dollars could be spent without any payment whatever. While EMTALA made sure that everyone gets emergency care, it raised the cost spiral. It didn't help. As the government tried to put the cost genie back in the bottle, hospitals and doctors raised their usual, customary, and reasonable rates. Then they negotiated with insurance companies to give discounts. The final discount was still an increase in rates, so people with insurance paid more, but anybody without insurance would pay so much that they'd be in real trouble. This acted as a one-way trip. You had to buy insurance. You didn't get a choice, or else you would be financially devastated. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services started looking for other ways to cut costs. One of them was to look at my usual, customary, and reasonable charge for any given procedure. If I charged a certain amount of money for a gallbladder surgery, then did one as a charity case, they would see that zero charge and say, okay, that's now your usual and customary charge. So I could never do another gallbladder procedure and get paid. This absolutely abolished charity care. Many other fixes have been tried, but none of them have worked. The problem is getting bigger and bigger, and the reason it's getting bigger and bigger is the bureaucratic mindset. Remember, in the law of the bureaucrat, we learned that everything can be fixed with a rule. So Obamacare, which is the end of this massive problem, is just simply a large accumulation of rules. Now, it was done as a part of law, but when we look at the law, it's passed by people with a bureaucratic mindset. Now, they're labeled congressmen, but they still believe if we pass enough rules, we'll fix the problem. Instead, they have simply piled more on top of the problem, making it worse and worse. Now, supposedly when they started, there were 30 million people who were uninsured. How many new people are insured as a result of Obamacare? Well, the best average number is about 5 million. And when we look at what was spent, we've learned that for every person who was insured, they spent roughly $65,000 a year. Now, in 2010, when Obamacare was proposed, it cost about $17,000 a year to insure a family of 4. So if we look at that and say we spent $65,000, well, that's roughly $250,000 that was spent each year, when in fact we could have spent $17,000. But remember, the bureaucrats are always right. There is, in fact, no private market in medicine. Free enterprise does not exist. What we have is fascism, which is the unholy marriage of government and private enterprise. This should make us run when we hear government-private partnership. That's just more fascism somewhere else. We'll have more in future installments. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.